Alright, we're going to be making a value scale using watercolors, and the color we're going to use is black only for this particular project. The first thing we have to do is make a few value bars, and we'll use this model that we did in pencil and ink. So if you have this same worksheet, you want to take it out and we'll use it as a reference. You're going to be making your own. You're going to make 3 more on a sheet of watercolor paper. That's the 9x12 thickest paper in your student kit. To make the value bars, you can measure out with a ruler. Hopefully you've got one. It's 10 squares, each is an inch. So I'm making a line on both sides of the ruler, up to 10. Connect, connect. I move the ruler to the outside of my big rectangle to find where those lines go. Done. Now I can do 2 more of those. Now this time I'm going to put them a little closer together than they were on the pencil worksheet. And here's why. You don't have a lot of watercolor paper. I'm sorry I could not give you more. But what you do have is useful, and we're going to use this paper for multiple purposes. The first is making the value scales that we're starting with today. But notice there's a lot of blank area on this sheet of paper. You're going to be able to test colors on any area that's blank, and that also includes the back. That's important in watercolor especially because, to be honest, sometimes the color when it's on your palette lid does not look the same as when you go and put it on your paper. It just soaks into the paper differently than it does on the lid. So it's really important to see what it's actually going to look like before you use it on your paper. A watercolor is a pretty forgiving medium. It does erase if you work with it with good quality paper and you let it dry a little bit. You can kind of scrub a little bit out and continue on. Alright, so I've got 3 bars, as you can see there, and each one is going to be used for a different purpose. The first one we'll use today, and that's going to be for a grayscale. So that's just going to be us working with black only, making a scale from the lightest to the darkest. Okay? The next one we'll do will be a monochromatic scale. We'll do that later. And then finally we'll do an intensity change scale. All this other area, the edges and around, I do not mind if you fill it with little marks like this and this when you're trying to figure out the perfect colors for your project. When that side's dry, you also have the back in a whole other area to work. Okay, so now we're going to get started making the tones. Now the values, we're only going to use black, so I'm just wetting the black color right now. I'm going to put some of it over here on the palette. It looks really dark there, doesn't it? Okay, add a little water and you can see it gets lighter. Now how dark is dark? It's almost impossible to tell at this point, especially if you've never done this before. So use that paper to test. Okay, that's pretty dark. So leave that puddle there. Now try to make another one. This one is really, really light. It's just made of the water and whatever watercolor was still in my brush. Nice. Remember what I'm trying to do is get 10 different tones to fill this in. Okay, so there's 2 already. Now I've got to find a whole lot between that. Try to remember where they are on your palette. Maybe even work in a direction so you know darkest to lightest. If you do accidentally forget, it's not a big deal. It's not that hard to go backward as well. Okay, and as you can see now, I've got 3 completely different ones. Alright, so to start with the first one, the first one's going to be very, very light. So I'm going to add a whole lot of water to some black, test it up here. It's the lightest thing I came up with today, and I'm going to use that. Now, this assignment will be graded for 2 things, correct values and neatness. So it's your first opportunity to learn brush control. That first one is very, very light. Maybe only I can tell I did anything to that one. Now, since I have all this room to play around, I'm going to put my next one, the test, right next to those. I, again, don't mind if it's messy and you have all this stuff around, as long as what's in the rectangles, or squares, what's really in the value bars is correct. We'll be good. Okay, so I got another one. Let's see, progressively getting a little bit darker. That's good. At first, it's sometimes hard to tell when it's wet because it does reflect light and looks a little bit brighter than it actually is. When you do yours, you don't have to go as fast as me. I'm going as fast as I can within reason so that you can get started quickly. Try to keep the puddles from touching each other. If you have to wait to let one dry, go ahead. It's important because watercolor is sort of a waiting game. It's not good for people who like to rush, honestly. It's forgiving, but there are moments when you really, truly have to let the watercolor just sit, dry, and do its thing. And I'm getting very close to that moment. You may notice I'm not trying to touch the very edges of the colors, even though it would probably look nicer if I did, but I'm trying to go fast. Okay, and they are definitely getting darker. And I can check by squinting. Remember the squinting technique. You're almost closing your eyes and letting in a lot less light come in. What information comes in tells you just about light and dark, and a lot less about details, even color. Okay. Now, I've worked my way all the way across, and again, I went much faster than I want you to. You take your time. You can be getting all the different values ready on your palette first in tiny little puddles, then place them where they should go correctly. Okay? Now I did that pretty quickly, but you can see maybe some are a little too similar. Let it dry a little bit, and you can totally go over an area and make it darker. Okay? Either way, let it dry, check it out at arm's length, squinting. If you've got 10 different values there, the first one is done for you. Remember, that one's blank, leave it alone, and then you're done.